A stage accident sent away a rising star in the music industry. And as a result, an orphan aged 4 or 5 has been added to the starting welfare home of Blue Star. It wasn't until one day, on his way as a city treasure hunter, that he accidentally saved a beautiful CEO, and the story officially began. The female CEO adopted him and provided him with a platform to showcase his talents, and from then on, the entertainment industry of Blue Star has added a stirring young man. He has some knowledge of comics, Go, anime, music, and more. When he reached adulthood and began to step into the public eye, he suddenly realized that the vest he wore as a child was already the youth of countless people. This is a story of mutual achievement. This book, also known as Looking at Entertainment from a Different Perspective, at the beginning of the second volume, the protagonist has already grown up. Please feel free to taste it. Mamoda. Keywords of the novel. The Great Entertainer adopted by a female CEO. No pop-ups. The Great Entertainer adopted by a female CEO. Complete collection. Download TXT, the latest chapter reading of The Great Entertainer adopted by a female CEO. Chapter 1. Female drivers visiting the door. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Female drivers visiting the door. Blue Star, Magic City. Starting point. Welfare home, lunch break time. The welfare home is quiet. Only when the summer wind occasionally blows over the wudong tree can there be several cicadas chirping. Crunch. The door of a certain dormitory was quietly opened, revealing a small head carved in powder and jade, vigilantly surveying the surrounding environment. Fortunately, that woman is not here. The little boy tiptoed onto the door, then leaned against the wall and slowly walked towards the corner at the entrance. As he watched the approaching corner, a smile appeared on the little boy's plump and tender face. As soon as he passed this corner, there was a high possibility that he would sneak out. Unfortunately, there was an accident at the last moment. As soon as he reached the corner, he was picked up by someone. Without looking back, the little boy knew who was playing with him just by the warm touch on his neck at this moment. Ha! This boring woman, is she treating me like a toy? Looking at the ground getting further and further away from him, the little boy blushed and kicked his short legs, but unfortunately, there was a huge difference in strength between the two sides, and his resistance was only in vain. Wen Yan, why did you come out again during your lunch break? It's Sister Chi, cough cough. The little boy leaned back hard before trying to make room for himself to speak. Quickly put me down, I need to go to the bathroom. The C-level expert, in front of me who can score 80 points in appearance is called Zhao Wanqi. She is a current student at a nearby music college and came to the Welfare Institute to volunteer during the summer vacation. Zhao Wanqi made a crisp sound on the little guy's forehead. Why do you feel that the toilet is too narrow for you to open when you come here after using it? She placed Wen Yan on the ground and poked his forehead with her tender white fingers, saying, you must be trying to sneak out again when you're a little kid. Without waiting for Wen Yan to explain, she directly revealed. Don't lie, Dean Wen told me already. A month ago, you sneaked out and didn't come back until it was dark for a long time. She was so anxious that she thought you had lost her. So now, you are my key caregiver. Are you treating me like a 3-year-old child? Can you still get lost after a walk outside? I have been in this world for several years now, but Wen Yan still cannot accept it. I have traveled through it inexplicably. He was originally a rising star in the Chinese music industry, but he didn't encounter a truck driver who loves to take time travel orders, but was escorted away by the lifting platform of his concert. Life is full of surprises. The lifting platform is indeed a big weapon for concerts. What's even more outrageous is his current state. A human cub. Alas, Wen Yan sighed to himself that the stage accident was due to the lack of experienced truck drivers. At Blue Star, the legal age of majority is 16 years old, which means that if no one adopts him, he will have to live in a welfare home for about 10 years. As for why did he slip out? Of course, we need to pursue a great cause. This undertaking not only protects the ecological environment of cities and makes outstanding contributions to the construction of green cities, but also promotes the re-employment of laid-off workers and adds bricks and tiles to economic development. Yes, this job is a treasure hunter in the city. Cough, blow it up. Actually, it's just picking up junk when Yen felt humiliated by the passers by. Seeing the people who went through the ancient times, she waved her hand. Cement glass papermaking, perfume MSG penicillin. Not only can it easily earn money, but it can also promote the transformation of social productivity. But when he comes here, in order to earn some starting capital, he has to go everywhere to pick up junk, and at the same time, he has to find ways to hide it from Dean Wen and not let her discover it. Otherwise, this only source of income would also be forcibly cut off by the kind old lady of the dean. The reason why Zhao Wanqi was staring at him was also very simple, afraid that he would sneak out again and something unexpected would happen. Before, he used to run out during lunch break, and as long as he could come back before dinner, Dean Wen wouldn't say anything. After all, in the past, he behaved very well and was seen as a well-behaved child in the eyes of the old lady. Dean Wen also wanted him to play on the street. But since his late return a month ago, his trust in the old lady's eyes has been discounted, and it's not as easy for him to run out like before. It can be said that he has been in a semi-restricted state for the past month. Thinking of the reason for his foot ban, Wen Yen felt a bit aggrieved. He had done a good deed at that time. He was walking back to the welfare home when he unexpectedly witnessed a car accident. A competition between two female drivers. That's okay, encountering a car accident is not that uncommon. At most, it's just a shock, but what's outrageous is that the female driver who caused the accident actually ran away. The key is that the remaining one is still unconscious. At that time, the intersection was quite remote, and pedestrians could not be found for a while. Wen Yen had to grit his teeth and climb in through the broken car window, using a woman's phone to make an emergency call. Due to his young age, this flipping operation naturally took him a lot of time. In addition, to prevent accidents, he waited for an ambulance to arrive before quietly leaving. This fluctuation led to Mrs. Wen approaching a state of violent behavior when he returned to the welfare home. What's even more heart-wrenching is that in his haste, he left his labor results in place. Thinking of this, Wen Yen feels a bit helpless. They all say that good people have good karma, but when they come to their own place, it doesn't work. It's rare for me to meddle in my own affairs, but I even managed to get in touch with the fruits of an afternoon's labor and have been banned. It's really hard to please. How could those rags be sold for 3 or 4 yuan? They're enough to buy 7 or 8 yuan of pudding for the friends at the welfare home. Alternatively, buying 2 packs of Wei Long would be enough for them to have a happy afternoon. It's a pity Zhao Wanqi looked at Wen Yan's somewhat depressed expression and thought he was sad because he couldn't go out to play. She also couldn't bear it. Dang dang, take a look at what sister has prepared for you. She took out a small yellow book from her pocket as if offering a treasure. Wen Yen glanced at the children's comics of this world and secretly curled his lips. Although many children in the welfare home love to read comics, this obviously does not include him. Don't even think of sneaking out. The manga has come out again. How about sister accompanying you to read the manga? Not much. Wen Yen was about to find a reason to politely reject Zhao Wanqi's proposal when he saw a brand new SUV driving in outside the welfare home. The SUV with the pirate ship logo stopped not far in front of the two people. The car door opened and a woman in a black business suit got out of the car. The woman is about 1.7 meters tall and slender, paired with standard business attire. Although it covers the curves of her body, it directly fills her aura. As she raised her snow-white neck, Wen Yen could see her features clearly. She had a classic oval face, curved crescent eyebrows, long and curly eyelashes, a graceful Cheong nose, and rosy lips. Ignoring those bright and penetrating eyes that seemed to penetrate the human heart, looking only at the contours of the facial features seemed a bit familiar. Wen Yen felt as if he had seen this woman somewhere before. Newcomer's new book, please take good care of it. During the new book period, if the experts cannot see the latest chapter before Wednesday, they can go to the latest chapter in advance to check in. This can provide the author with an effective follow-up reading. Dog head, end of this chapter. Chapter 2. Adoption. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Adoption. Zhao Wanqi also noticed the woman and whispered, this woman's aura is a bit strong, and it's not easy to provoke at first glance. Let's stay away from her. While speaking, she pulled Wen Yen aside and made way for the woman in front of her. She is actually a proud person, whether it is her excellent grades, impressive appearance, or impressive figure, all of which are her proud capital. It can be said that from childhood to adulthood, she has been a template for parents to refer to her as someone else's child. But when faced with the gaze of the woman in front of her, she dared not look at her. Humph, this must be a disadvantage of age. In a few years, my aura will definitely be stronger than hers. Zhao Wanqi secretly pokes in her heart to boost herself. Looking at Zhao Wanqi, who was timid in a second, Wen Yen felt a bit speechless. With just this little courage, he would ravage himself all day long. Is it really like he's lying in his den? However, as he watched the woman getting closer and closer, Wen Yan's sense of familiarity grew stronger in his heart. He has definitely seen this woman before. Little one, do you still remember me? The woman's cold voice rang in her ear, and Wen Yen instinctively nodded. After realizing it, he quickly shook his head to deny it. All of these actions are in line with his current age. After carefully examining the woman's face and glancing at the brand new SUV not far away, Wen Yen suddenly realized that this could not be the female driver from a month ago, could it? That day, because the woman's hair was messy, he didn't see her facial features clearly, and didn't expect her to be so beautiful. Is this what the legend says? Cavalry becomes infantry, blur becomes high definition, and resolution increases linearly. The woman was amused by the warm words, her lips slightly curled up, revealing two charming dimples. Your name is Wen Yen, right? How do you know? Wen Yen hid behind Zhao Wanqi, pulling at her hem and revealing half of her head. Isn't that difficult? The woman took out a bulging nylon bag from the car. Although my previous car was scrapped, the dash cam was not damaged. As for the name, for a child as old as you who is about to go out to pick up garbage around here, it's just you. It's really that woman. Wen Yen probed and said, what is that sister doing here? The item is returned to its original owner. The woman handed the velvet bag back to Wen Yen. By the way, I'll talk to your dean about something. Since you saved me, I have to do something. What are you doing? Are you here to donate? Wen Yen was secretly pleased. This woman looks very wealthy at first glance, so she should be very generous. Did you go out to collect garbage? Did you save her? Listening to their conversation, Zhao Wanqi felt a bit disorganized. She understood every word, but she still didn't understand what was going on. Seeing the woman constantly talking to Wen Yen, Zhao Wanqi felt as if her super Sikh girl had been ignored. She took 2 steps forward, straightened out a sizable crispy chest, boosted her momentum, and raised her snow-white chin, asking. You just said, are you looking for the dean? The woman put aside the kindness she had during her conversation with Wen Yen and returned to her usual cold demeanor at work. Is there a problem? No, no problem. Zhao Wanqi took 2 steps back and returned to her original position, explaining, what I mean is, if you want to find the dean, I can take you there. Wen Yen followed behind the two, thinking that Zhao Wanqi should change her name to Zhao Xiaogui, which would be more appropriate. The 3 of them arrived at the door of Dean Wen's room. Zhao Wanqi knocked on the door and heard the inside say, please come in, before pushing it open, gesturing for the woman behind her to enter. Wen Yen originally wanted to follow in and see if this woman really wanted to donate. This was the investment he brought in, and his demand for a share of the pie should not be excessive. But Zhao Wanqi closed the door directly. Then he was grabbed by the fair little hands and picked up by the back collar. This familiar operation made Wen Yan feel a bit helpless. To avoid being killed by Zhao Wanqi's brother in his arms again, he quickly asked. "Sister Qi, what's wrong with you? I didn't want to sneak out this time." Zhao Wanqi changed her grip to a hug, holding Wen Yan under her armpit and using her other hand to fiercely tug at his pink little face. "Tell me quickly, what's going on? How could you go out to collect garbage? And how could she say, you saved her, dot?" As she spoke, she stared at Shui Lingling's big eyes and threatened, "If I don't say it, I'll have to use my family rules." "Hello, childish and gentle. Zhao Wanqi's actions made you feel a bit amused. You are already an adult and still trying to be cute in front of me, a child." Crunch. Just as he was about to explain, the door was opened and Dean Wan, with a chain-style reading glasses hanging around his neck, walked out from inside. Through Dean Wan and the others, they could see that the woman was sitting on the sofa in front of the reception table just now, holding a cup of tea and also looking towards them. Dean Wan is an elderly woman in her 60s who was a music teacher before retirement, so she has a scholarly aura and a friendly personality. Seeing the two of them at this moment, she was not surprised either. Without him, it was just a habit. There are many children in the welfare home, but Zhao Wanqi only likes to play with warm words. "Stop making a fuss, quickly put him down. It's been said many times, don't just pick him up and twist him around." Zhao Wanqi stuck out her tongue, quickly put down Wen Yan, and thoughtfully trimmed his somewhat messy hair. "Teacher Wen, it's not my fault. Didn't you say you wanted me to help you keep an eye on him? This little guy is too mischievous. You're entertaining guests, and I'm afraid he might cause trouble for you." Mrs. Wen chuckled lightly at the words and said, "You're just as cunning as you were in high school." That's right, Mrs. Wen was Zhao Wanqi's high school music teacher, which is why she volunteered at the welfare home during the summer vacation. "Let's all come in. I happen to have something to tell you." Dean Wen turned around and returned to the room, gesturing for the two to sit opposite the woman and introducing each other's identities. Of course, this refers to Zhao Wanqi and the woman across from each other, and it was not until then that Wen Yan learned the name of this woman. Wang Luoqi. After an introduction, Mrs. Wen looked at Wang Luoqi and asked, "Miss Wang, were you serious about what you just said?" Wang Luoqi glanced at Wen Yan across from him, then nodded and said, "I have seriously considered it, otherwise I wouldn't have waited until today." Wen Yan pretended to be curious and asked, "Grandma Wen, what are you talking about?" Mrs. Wen smiled and rubbed his head, saying, "Miss Wang said she wants to adopt you." Zhao Wanqi, who was drinking water, choked on the words. Cough cough. After taking a few breaths, she said, "Teacher Wen, you're not joking, are you? She wants to adopt Wen Yan. How old is she? This doesn't comply with the adoption law, does it?" Wen Yan was also surprised by the old lady's words. Isn't this woman here to donate money? Why is he suddenly going to be adopted? What kind of divine deployment is this? I saved you, but you want to be my mother. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Giving you a childhood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Giving you a childhood. Faced with Zhao Wanqi's questioning, Wang Luoqi replied in a cold voice. Regarding the provisions on adopters in China's adoption law. Those who have no children or only one child, have the ability to raise and educate the adopted person, have not suffered from diseases that are medically deemed unsuitable for adoption, and have reached the age of 30. In addition, according to the provisions of the civil law, if a spouse adopts a child, they must agree to adopt it together. If a man adopts a woman without a spouse, the age difference between the adopter and the adopted person should be at least 40 years. After speaking, she looked at Zhao Wanqi and said, "Miss Zhao, do you have any further questions?" Zhao Wanqi choked for a moment and said, "How did you know so clearly?" Wang Luoqi was puzzled and said, "Before doing something, one must be well prepared. Isn't this common sense? Even so, you don't meet the adoption criteria, do you? Are you 30 years old?" Zhao Wanqi forced herself to save her dignity. Wang Luoqi crossed his hands on his abdomen, tilted his body backwards, and leaned against the backrest of the sofa. "I think Miss Zhao misunderstood. We should be of similar age, so I naturally don't meet the adoption age. But I came on behalf of my mother, who is 39 years old this year and fully meets the adoption requirements." "Who is your age?" "I am only 16 years old this year." Zhao Wanqi secretly complained in her heart, but continued to retort. "Then you should let your mother come in person. Adopting a child is not about adopting a pet. How could you make such a hasty decision?" "Ah Chi, how can you speak?" Dean Wen, who had been watching, interrupted at the right moment. "Miss Wang, don't mind. Wanqi doesn't have any other intentions either. She mainly treats Wen Yan as her younger brother and cares about this child. However, what she said also makes some sense. With such a big matter, do you think your mother should come over? After all, although our welfare home is small in scale, all procedures must go through formal procedures." Looking at Mrs. Wen and Zhao Wanqi, one singing, red face, and the other singing, white face, Wen Yan felt a bit amused, but a warmth also rose in his heart. As the old lady said, their various inquiries were actually just about caring about themselves, afraid that the family who adopted them would be too hasty and ultimately harm themselves. Wang Luoqi took out his phone and gestured. Just as the three people across from her thought she was going to call his mother, she handed her phone over. Mrs. Wen hesitated for a moment, but still took her phone. Just a few glances, she put on the reading glasses hanging on her chest again, as if she had seen some amazing information. Wen Yan and Zhao Wanqi were both curious, and when they saw the situation, they leaned in and saw a person's identity information displayed on their phone screen. It looked like the woman across from them. Wang Luoqi, female, Han ethnicity, chairman of the board of directors and CEO of Calixiang Pharmaceutical Group. After reading this passage, Wen Yan only had one word in his heart. "I'm a rich woman." If this is Earth, when people hear the name Calixiang, the first thing that comes to mind is undoubtedly the milk tea king jokingly referred to by netizens as the bottom line of the Chinese music industry. But in the magic city of Blue Star, people must think of this pharmaceutical company with a market value of billions, because its influence has already been integrated into people's daily lives. In the Magic City, there are not yet several regular medicines from the 7 Li Xiang group in anyone's family. But continuing to read the detailed information below, Wen Yan silently replaced the label of rich woman with hanging pressure. This Nima, what kind of life is it to have such a legendary resume? At the age of 12, he participated in the college entrance examination and was successfully admitted to Yanjing University. At the age of 14, he completed his courses and completed his graduation defense. In the same year, he was admitted to Wharton Business School in the United States. "I took the college entrance examination at the age of 12 and even got into Yanda University. How could you make me feel like a scumbag? Is this the legendary god of learning?" Under strong pressure, Wen Yan continued to look down at the inferiority complex in his heart. At the age of 15, due to the death of his father, he graduated early and returned to China to start managing the group's business. After reaching adulthood at 16, he smoothly completed the transition and officially assumed the position of chairman and CEO of the group's board of directors. Ah! Before finishing reading, Wen Yan heard a scream in his ear. Zhao Wanqi's tone was full of surprise. You are the genius girl on the news 4 years ago, Wang Luoqi, who was admitted to Yan University at the age of 12. Obviously, for her, there is no such thing as a CEO who is not a CEO. She was not able to be admitted to the highest university in the country at the age of 12, which was truly impressive. Wang Luoqi just nodded slightly, seemingly not very interested in the title of genius girl. She took out another card from her pocket and handed it to Mrs. Wen, who was still a bit dazed. This is my mother's ID card. You can verify her personal information. She is the deputy director of our First People's Hospital, and these identity information can be found online. Dean Wen took his ID card, but instead of searching on Wang Luoqi's phone, he looked at Zhao Wanqi. Zhao Wanqi immediately understood and quickly ran to the old-fashioned computer on her desk, starting a series of crackling operations. A few minutes later, she stood up and nodded at Dean Wen. Obviously, during this time, she had already reconfirmed the information of Wang Luoqi and her mother. Wang Luoqi took out another document from his bag and said, "My mother is currently on a business trip and cannot come to handle the adoption procedures in person. That's why I came to handle it on her behalf. This is a power of attorney with my mother's signature on it." Mrs. Wen took the power of attorney and, with a serious expression, helped her reading glasses. In fact, she wanted to tell the girl in front of her that although welfare institutions of our size require formal procedures to adopt children, they are not as strict as they are. As long as the family is innocent, meets the legal requirements for adopting children, and has a stable income job, their welfare home will generally agree. About 3 minutes later, Mrs. Wen closed the document and said, "With your mother's power of attorney, it also meets the prescribed procedures. However, I have a question. This is your first time coming to the welfare home, right? How could you choose Wen Yan directly?" Wang Luoqi recounted what happened a month ago, but to the extent that it hurt the old lady's face, she did not mention the matter of Wen Yan picking up waste. After all, having a child in their early years go to collect waste is a bit of a deliberate slap in the face. She naturally understands how to organize a group in an orderly manner. After listening to Wang Luoqi's explanation, the old lady pulled Wen Yan up to her and gently rubbed his head. With some regret, she said, "Little one, why didn't you tell Grandma that night? I remember Grandma even got angry at you at that time." Then, there was another charge of lying. Wen Yan added one more crime to another. He secretly roasted that he was a man of 2 generations. He knew parents' operation too well. Mrs. Wen rubbed Wen Yan's small head while conducting her final probing. Wen Yan is the best-looking and also the most obedient child in our hospital. I have always raised him as my own grandson, but he is too sensible. Being sensible is heartbreaking. The implicit meaning of the old lady is that Wen Yan is a bit precocious. As the director of the welfare home, she naturally understands that families who come to adopt children prefer ignorant children who are easy to cultivate emotions. But the old lady still revealed Wen Yan's situation, because choosing to conceal such things is actually deceit, and in the end, she was discovered by others, and it was still the child who was hurt. The old lady has been raising Wen Yan as her own grandson, but she doesn't want him to suffer this injustice. If she really doesn't agree, she will continue to raise this child. Although the welfare home is poor, the child's clothing and food will not be missing. Wang Luoqi understood the old lady's suggestion and made a promise. "Please rest assured that since I am going to adopt this child, I am mentally prepared. The situation you are worried about will not happen." "That's good." After everything was settled, Wang Luoqi walked up to Wen Yan, squatted down, looked into his eyes, and asked, "Little guy, are you willing to go with sister?" "Good guy, finally remembered to ask me for the opinion of the person involved," Wen Yan retorted and then asked, "Can I ask a question?" "Of course you can. Why did you adopt me? Because I saved you." After a moment of silence, Wang Luoqi replied, "Because I want to give you a childhood." Then she rubbed Wen Yan's head and added in her heart, "A carefree childhood." End of this chapter. Chapter 4, But I'm Old. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4, But I'm Old. Wen Yan ultimately agreed to Wang Luoqi's adoption request and chose to go with her. This is not because she was moved by her sentence, "I want to give you a childhood." As the soul of an adult, childhood is just a beautiful memory for him, it is a past that can never be returned. Although his body has returned to his youth, he no longer has the same mentality as before, which may be considered a tragedy for adults. He agreed to Wang Luoqi's adoption request only because she could provide a good development platform for himself. Not to mention anything else, it's not easy for him to access the internet in the welfare home, and all the entertainment works in his mind have become decorations, making it difficult for a clever woman to cook without rice. Of course, in addition to material conditions, Wang Luoqi's extraordinary appearance is also an important factor that cannot be ignored, and he does not deny this. After all, everyone has a love for beauty, and Wen Yan is ultimately a layman. Under the influence of Wang Luoqi's identity background and the active cooperation of Dean Wen, the adoption procedures were handled extremely smoothly. This made Wen Yan somewhat emotional, and indeed, regardless of the time and space background, money ability is a convenience. If I were to switch to an ordinary family, without going to the Civil Affairs Bureau 5 or 6 times and presenting various documents to prove it, I would really want to complete the adoption procedures. As a result, when she arrived at Wang Luoqi's place, she made a phone call and completed all the procedures. In a few days, she could go to the Civil Affairs Bureau to print a new household registration book. In a few days, Wen Yan's name will appear in Wang Luoqi's household registration book, with her mother as the head of the household. Watching all the dust settle, Mrs. Wen also went to help Wen Yan tidy up her things. Suddenly, Zhao Wanqi felt a bit empty in her heart. She pulled Wen Yan to a corner and crouched down to gently pinch his small face, but did not notice that a hazy mist had already formed in her eyes. Zhao Xiaogui, what's wrong with you? Did you get a bug in your eye? Come on, I'll blow it for you. Wen Yan spoke and blew a few breaths in front of Zhao Wanqi, while wiping away the tears from the corners of her eyes without leaving a trace. He knew that the girl in front of him had some proud and coquettish qualities, and he definitely didn't want to see her cry, so he didn't point it out. What Zhao Xiaogui? Wen Xiaoyan, have you developed skills? If you dare to give your sister a nickname, see how I can deal with you. As she spoke, she wanted to tug at Wen Yan's back collar and give him a hug to kill his younger brother. But when she saw Wang Luoqi not far away, she hesitated for a moment and finally put down her small hand, feeling inexplicably bitter in her heart. After all, he is someone else's younger brother. If you play with the little guy again, you need to pay attention to their thoughts. Watching Zhao Wanqi raise and lower her arms, Wen Yan couldn't bear it anymore. Although the girl in front of her was childish, proud, and always liked to argue with him, often making him suffocate, she was really good to herself. Sister Qi, even if I am adopted, you can still go see me with the dean's grandmother. We can still see each other frequently, Wen Yan comforted softly. Zhao Wanqi sniffed and said, can that be the same? In the future, you will be someone else's younger brother, so you won't kiss me anymore. You little red rascal, don't forget me. You must always remember who pulled you up with a bunch of feces and urine. Wen Yan. What a terrible line. If I remember correctly, you would have helped me change my diaper once, and he almost meowed me on the face. After a moment, Zhao Wanqi also calmed down her complicated emotions. She looked at Wen Yan and reminded her, after going there, you should be obedient and take care of yourself. Glancing at Wang Luoqi not far away, she straightened her chest as if boosting herself. If she dares to bully you, just give me a call, and then Aki will go find her to settle the accounts. Watching Zhao Wanqi's fierce little appearance, if it weren't for knowing her true nature, Wen Yan would have almost believed it. Seeing Mrs. Wen walking towards us with a backpack in the distance, Zhao Wanqi knew that time was running out. She took out 200 yuan from her pocket and handed it to Wen Yan. Even if you lack pocket money, don't ask me for it. Don't pick up things again in the future, let the old lady know, she will definitely be sad. Wen Yan originally wanted to refuse, but seeing the sincerity in Zhao Wanqi's eyes, he couldn't say anything. Perhaps only by receiving these 200 yuan can she feel at ease. Seeing that Mrs. Wen had already walked to Wang Luoqi's side, Zhao Wanqi did not delay any longer and took Wen Yan's small hand, walking towards the two of them. Mrs. Wen handed her backpack to Wen Yan and rubbed his head, saying, "Xiao Yan, please go to the car and wait for a while. I have something to talk to Miss Wang." "What kind of whispers are we going to talk about? Even as a party involved, I can't listen to Wen Yan. I feel a bit curious, but he can only obediently listen. The sound insulation effect of Wang Luoqi's SUV is very good. Sitting in the passenger seat, there is no conversation outside. Wen Yan can only boredly examine the interior of the car. Well, it's very luxurious and spacious." After a while, Wang Luoqi returned to the car and it seemed that the conversation had ended. She fastened her seatbelt and looked at Wen Yan, asking softly, "How did Dean Wen treat you? Among the children in the welfare home, only my surname is Wen." Looking at the sunken seatbelt, Wen Yan quickly glanced away and turned his head to look out the window. "Do not look unless you are polite. This woman is wearing formal attire, which was not very noticeable when she was inside earlier. Now, as soon as she is restrained by her seatbelt, she immediately reveals her true self, so she should be good to you. How could she still let you go pick up things? Is the funding of the welfare home very scarce?" "I secretly picked it up, Grandma Wen didn't know." Wen Yan's eyes changed and he asked, "Do you want to donate to the welfare home?" Wang Luoqi started the car and said, "Let's talk about it in a while. Today, I'm just here to adopt you." Feeling the shaking of the car body, Wen Yan immediately clenched his seatbelt. He still remembered the tragedy a month ago and held a skeptical attitude towards Wang Luoqi's driving skills. "Ha!" Wang Luoqi curled his lips as he looked at Wen Yan's flustered expression. "That day was just an accident, and my driving skills were quite good." Sigh. As the vehicle drove away from the welfare home, Mrs. Wen sighed. "Teacher Wen, since you can't bear to leave with Wen Yan, why do you still agree to that woman's adoption request?" Zhao Wanqi was puzzled. Although the economy in the courtyard is not abundant, it is not impossible to support him. Dean Wen looked at the children who were gradually leaving the dormitory as the lunch break ended, and a hint of sadness appeared in her eyes. "Silly child, what do you know? The children in this welfare home are not just lacking in food and clothing. I know, you're saying he still lacks the company of his family, but aren't we his family?" The old lady wiped her reading glasses, her lips moved slightly, and her voice was also slightly inaudible. "But I'm getting old. The signing status has been changed. Please perform a one-click 3 in a row, recommended ticket, monthly ticket, reward, Memeda, newcomers are not easy, please support us." End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Isn't Auntie on a business trip? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Isn't Auntie on a business trip? In the car, due to his height, Wen Yan couldn't see the road ahead. He simply closed his eyes and stopped looking, showing a very calm demeanor. However, his figure curled up on the backrest and his small hand tightly gripping the seatbelt still exposed his inner confusion. Until the sound of parking came in his ear, Wen Yan opened his eyes, but when he straightened up and looked out the window, he was stunned for a moment. "Luoqi sister, won't we go home?" Wen Yan felt that since Wang Luoqi wanted to adopt her, she would definitely take her home first to familiarize herself with the environment, but she didn't expect to take her to the central business district of the Magic City. "This won't be taking me to work, will it?" Wen Yan had a bad guess in his heart. Wang Luoqi unbuttoned his seatbelt and pointed to the nearby Yida Square. "I'm usually busy and afraid I won't have time. Taking advantage of today's break, I'll help you buy some clothes first." Wen Yan nodded and followed Wang Luoqi out of the car, but did not refuse her request to buy clothes for herself. After all, we will be living together in the future, and it is not good to be too open-minded. And he knew in his heart that the reason Wang Luoqi adopted him was nothing more than gratitude for helping her make an emergency call, and at most, some pity for his orphan status. Anyway, from the current performance, Wang Luoqi is quite reliable, and being adopted by her should be a good thing. The two of them entered the mall and headed towards the children's clothing store on the third floor. However, as they passed by the ordinary person style on the second floor, Wang Luoqi stopped slightly. She looked at Wen Yan's hair and asked, "How about we get a haircut first? Your current age is not suitable for keeping hair too long." Okay, Wen Yan still nodded in agreement. But this time he nodded even more, because that was also his idea. In the welfare home, although there are also aunties who cut their hair, it is usually only done once a month. Now it is summer, and a little exercise can wet their hair, making it very greasy. As soon as the two of them walked to the entrance of the barber's shop, a clerk greeted them and said, "Mr. Wang, are you here for a haircut? I'll help you call the store manager." Obviously, Wang Luoqi should be a familiar guest here. In no time, a woman in her 30s walked out from behind the barber shop. As soon as she saw Wang Luoqi, she quickly greeted him. "Miss Wang didn't give any advance notice when she came over, so that I could also make some preparations." As the woman spoke, she also looked at the guests who were having their hair cut, which was very obvious. If she greeted them in advance, she would temporarily shut down and specialize in serving Wang Luoqi. This is a very normal phenomenon. If Wang Luoqi, a wealthy entrepreneur, could frequently visit her hair salon, it would also increase the level of attention in her storefront, which is completely worth her special treatment. Wang Luoqi shook his head and said, "Manager Li is too polite. I was also on the spur of the moment, and today was not my haircut either." She pointed to Wen Yan behind her and said, "I came today to cut this little guy's hair." "Who is this child?" The woman was curious. "My little brother." Although Manager Li was curious about how Wang Luoqi, who was clearly an only child, suddenly had a younger brother, she didn't ask much. She crouched down and smiled at Wen Yan, "No wonder I don't see such a cute child. It's really rare." After a brief exchange of greetings, the woman brought Wen Yan to the barber's table and began preparing to cut his hair, while Wang Luoqi sat in the rest area and made a phone call, apparently dealing with work matters. The woman sprinkled water on Wen Yan's head with a teapot and casually asked, "Child, do you have the hairstyle you want? Please give me a cut of the airplane nose." Wen Yan originally wanted to play a joke, but in order to fit his current age, he still said, "Just make it shorter. When Auntie cuts her hair later, don't move around, okay?" The woman reminded Wen Yan before she started. In fact, children aged 5 or 6 already know how to cooperate when getting a haircut, but Wen Yan came with Wang Luoqi, and women were more cautious than usual. "Okay, sister." Wen Yan nodded obediently. Since coming into this world, Wen Yan has become very good at speaking because he knows that saying more nice things can bring convenience to himself. Sure enough, upon hearing Wen Yan's sister, the smile on the woman's face became somewhat sincere. "Wow, you can talk." Just as Wen Yan was getting his haircut done, there was a sound of high heels touching the ground at the door. As the sound approached, the figure of a young woman appeared at the door. This woman is about 20 years old, wearing a professional business dress, with black stockings wrapped around her symmetrical calves, and the folder she is holding in her hand, making her look very capable. As soon as the woman entered the barber's shop and looked around, she headed straight to the rest area and came to Wang Luo's residence, handing her the folder. Wang Luoqi took the document and began to carefully review it with her head down. She didn't care about the slightly noisy noise in the barber's shop, as if it was her daily life. When Wang Luoqi finished processing the documents, Wen Yan also cut his hair, and the three of them left the barber shop and headed upstairs to the clothing area. When taking the elevator, Wang Luoqi introduced the identity of the woman next to Wen Yan and said, "This is my sister's colleague. You can call her Yi sister." "Hello Yi," Wen Yan smiled politely. Li knew about Wen Yan. In fact, when Wang Luoqi was hospitalized in a car accident, she found out Wen Yan's identity through a driving recorder. Seeing Wen Yen greet her, Li Yi responded with a gentle smile and said, "Little guy, you're also good." As she spoke, she took out a card from her wallet and handed it to Wen Yen, saying, "Sometimes the CEO may not be able to answer the phone. If you have something to do and cannot reach her, you can call me. I am on July 24th. Okay, thank you, Sister E." Wen Yen took the business card and saw that the director of the CEO's office should be Wang Luoqi's confidant. After a few words, the group also arrived at the clothing area on the third floor, but before taking a few steps, Li Yi suddenly pointed to a nearby storefront and reminded Wang Luoqi. "President, Director Wu is at the women's clothing store next door." Wen Yen looked in the direction pointed by Li Yi and saw a young woman in her 30s. She was wearing a slim-fitting beige qipao, outlining the graceful curves of her body. From a distance, there was a scholarly aura. At this moment, she was talking to the waiters in the women's clothing store, but when she spoke to the staff, she was very polite, but her expression had an inexplicable sense of alienation. As soon as Wang Luoqi saw the young woman in the clothing store, he stopped his steps. She picked up Wen Yan's small hand and walked back. Sister suddenly remembered that there was still some work to be done. "Why don't we come back to buy clothes another day?" Wen Yan was still a bit stunned. If he had read correctly, the beautiful young woman in the women's clothing store should be Wang Luoqi's mother. Wu Wanqing. But isn't she on a business trip out of town? In the new book period, there will need to be over 100 follow-up readings before the editor can give a test push, so friends who are raising books should occasionally flip to the latest chapters to read. Newcomers are not easy, please provide more support. For example, one-click triple connection. End of this chapter. I really like chapter 6. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I really like chapter 6. After leaving Yida Square, Li Yi returned to the company, and Wang Luoqi also led Wen Yen back to the car. While Wang Luoqi was starting the car, Wen Yen still asked the question in his heart. "That aunt just now was your mother, right?" Wang Luoqi paused slightly as he turned the key and said, "Do you know her? When you handed Grandma your ID card, I saw a photo of Auntie and just now EE called her Dean Wu." Wen Yen looked at Wang Luoqi with a somewhat complicated tone and said, "When you introduced Auntie to the welfare institution before, you didn't mention that she was the vice president of the People's Hospital. These two pieces of information combined, I shouldn't have mistaken the person." "You're right, the woman in the clothing store just now was indeed my mother," Wang Luoqi admitted directly. "Auntie is not on a business trip," Wen Yen bit his lip slightly. "So, you lied in the welfare home." At this moment, Wen Yen couldn't bear to say that it was not in line with his age, as it was related to a very important issue. "Auntie doesn't know you're going to adopt me, or does Auntie have no idea about my existence?" Wen Yen finally expressed his own speculation. This matter cannot be taken lightly, after all, he is only 5 or 6 years old now, and the situation of his adoptive family has a great impact on him. Buzzing. Wang Luoqi replied only when he started the car, "Your mind is very delicate, and your logic is also very meticulous. Your mind is indeed very mature. Are all my speculations true?" Wen Yen looked out of the car window with a somewhat helpless tone. An hour ago, he thought Wang Luoqi was very reliable, but he didn't expect her to play a game of stealing the sky and turning the sun on the most crucial issue. How many more can this adoption agreement be made without the knowledge of the head of household? Looking at Wang Luoqi's stunning profile, Wen Yen slowly said, "Why don't you send me back to the welfare home?" Wang Luoqi glanced at Wen Yen and said, "Why don't you want to come home with me? Your mother doesn't even know about my existence, so can the adoption procedures be handled smoothly?" Wen Yen said helplessly, "I don't want to become a gangster." "You know quite a lot," Wang Luoqi was somewhat surprised. When watching the video of the day of the car accident from the driving recorder, she found that the little boy who saved herself had a maturity far beyond that of her peers. But she still didn't expect that Wen Yan would become so mature that she even considered the legitimacy of the procedures and the issue of black households. Wang Luoqi comforted and said, "Don't worry, except for my mother who is not aware of this, all other procedures are formal, and you won't become a blacksmith. The head of the household is unaware, can this procedure be formal?" Wen Yan rolled his eyes and looked like, "I'm young, don't deceive me." Wang Luoqi was adorable by his small expression. She wanted to pinch the warm and plump little face, but she also feared that they were not familiar with each other, so she finally suppressed her thoughts from the bottom of her heart. "You're still young, so you don't understand the rules of adult games," explained Wang Luoqi. "I can't tell you too much, it's not such a glorious thing. You just need to know that your adoption procedures are formal." Wen Yan understood instantly, but he dared not say it. After all, the river crab god is everywhere. "Why don't you discuss with Auntie? Isn't it okay to go through the normal procedures?" As soon as the words were finished, Wen Yan reacted and said, "So, Auntie Wu won't agree to adopt me." The speed suddenly increased, and Wang Luoqi's tone also fluctuated slightly. She dreams of having a son." Wen Yan tightened his seatbelt and said, "Isn't this a willingness to adopt? She wants a son, but she won't take care of someone else's son." Qi Li Xiang Du. In Magic City, this is considered the most upscale residential area, built over a year ago, and is a test field for Qi Li Xiang Pharmaceutical Company to enter the real estate market. Accompanied by the sound of brakes, Wang Luoqi slowly parked the SUV in his own parking space. Wen Yan followed her out of the car and looked at the SUV parked steadily in the center of the parking space. Wen Yan somewhat believed that the car accident that night was really an accident. Wang Luoqi's driving skills are quite good, anyway, she is much stronger than those female drivers who always ask for a ride when parking a car. However, these are all small matters. The most important thing now is to understand your position in this home. If it really doesn't work, it's better to go back to the welfare home. Anyway, I have memories of my past life in my mind, so I can wait a few more years. As I grow older, I will naturally be able to access the internet and still make a name for myself. Wang Luoqi saw Wen Yan standing still, and she tilted her head and asked, "What's wrong?" "Sister Luoqi, my aunt didn't even agree to adopt me. It's not good for me to follow you home, isn't it?" Wen Yan blinked her big eyes. He always feels like a stray dog brought home by an unscrupulous girl, and if his parents don't agree, he might even be kicked out of the house. Wang Luoqi comforted and said, "Don't worry, she doesn't live here. We're the only two of us here, you don't have to be constrained at all." Unit 3, Room 601. Wen Yan followed Wang Luoqi into the room, and from the traces of life in the room, she really lived here alone. For example, in the shoe cabinet at the door, he did not find high heels, while Wu Wanqing has a habit of wearing qipao. She will live here, and there will definitely be a few pairs of high heels in the shoe cabinet. Taking the children's mop handed over by Wang Luoqi, he curiously surveyed the layout of the room, consisting of 3 bedrooms, 1 living room, 1 kitchen, and 1 bathroom, with a total area of about 100 square meters. Wen Yan was somewhat surprised. With Wang Luoqi's worth, she could completely afford a bigger house. Is this the low-key attitude of wealthy people? Okay, this house should not be cheap either. Even an ordinary salaried family can probably buy a living room. Come, I'll take you to see your room. Wang Luoqi led him into the second bedroom. Looking at the room layout with warm colors as the main tone, as well as the pink small table lamp on the bedside table, the dolls spread all over the bed, and the fresh green plants on the windowsill silently covering their faces with warm words, how could such a girlish decoration be so luxurious? However, recalling the newly opened sandals on the shoe cabinet and looking at the layout of the room that clearly did not conform to Wang Luoqi's style, Wen Yan's heart also felt a sense of warmth. Don't worry about whether she is reliable for now, this arrangement alone has put a lot of effort into it. I don't know what kind of room you like, so I decorated it according to my childhood room, Wang Luoqi said, seemingly seeking a sense of identification in his tone. What do you think? Do you still like it? I didn't expect you to be a little gongju when you were a child. From the moment we met, Wang Luoqi gave him the feeling of being capable, mature, and slightly dominant. I didn't expect her to have such a side. Why, don't you like it? Wang Luoqi's eyes flashed with disappointment. It's okay if you don't like it. You can decorate according to your own ideas. No, Sister Luoqi, I really like it. Wen Yan smiled at the corner of his mouth. Tickets, follow. Up reading, end of this chapter. Chapter 7. Beef Noodles. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Chapter 7 Beef Noodles. In fact, Wen Yan doesn't have high requirements for the layout of the room. He used to live in a multi-person dormitory in the Welfare Institute. If anyone wakes up late at night with a slightly louder noise, it can wake them up. Even in his past life, his family conditions were not good, and the rooms were not well divided. He slept with his parents until he was 7 or 8 years old. It wasn't until he entered 3rd grade that his father made a small bed for him in the miscellaneous room. What really pleased Wen Yan was that there was a computer in this second bedroom. You should know that his original intention for picking up bottles was to accumulate a sum of money, buy a computer and phone, and have access to the internet. I didn't expect him to pick up bottles in the wind and sun, and he only managed to save a fraction so far. Now it's so easy to achieve this. Sure enough, agreeing to Wang Luoqi's adoption request was the right choice. Wen Yan walked up to the computer desk with an eager expression and said, Sister Luoqi, can I use this computer on a regular basis? Of course, Wang Luoqi nodded. For her, technology products like computers are essential tools for work, but she also knows that some college students her age actually treat computers as game consoles. Although Wen Yan is only 5 or 6 years old, he is more mature than ordinary children. Children who are sensible early on are often more prone to getting stuck in difficult situations. Especially for children who are still from welfare institutions, Wen Yan lacks the companionship of his parents for a long time, and his thoughts are more sensitive. Wang Luoqi is also worried that he will become addicted to the world of games in order to escape reality, unable to extricate himself. So she advised, if you want to play games, you can't exceed 2 hours a day. If you can do it, I'll let you use the computer. At this point, she changed her tone and said, if you can't do it, I will confiscate the computer directly. Your threatening sentence structure is so insightful that he quickly said, Sister Luoqi, don't worry, I only play for a little while every day. He didn't explain that he was using a computer not to play games, because it was completely meaningless. The reason why every child asks their parents to buy a computer for themselves is particularly lofty. Wen Yan seems to have used learning English as a reason in his past life to make his father pay for a computer. As a result, he did use it to learn English, but he only learned CF, DNF, CS, and LOL. Okay, of course sister trusts you. Wang Luoqi smiled and extended his finger, saying, however, there is no basis for words. We need to draw a hook as a witness. Looking at the fair little hand in front of him, Wen Yan suddenly felt that he had misunderstood Zhao Wanqi before. He always felt that Zhao Wanqi was a bit childish, a bit silly and sweet, and sometimes even shamelessly flirted with her. But it was not until then that he realized that in the eyes of others, the naive person was actually him. He seems to have overlooked the fact that he is now a cute and soft little one, making serious promises, which appears particularly cute to outsiders. Wang Luoqi is not a little girl who has never seen the world before. From her personal resume and running a pharmaceutical company worth billions, it can be seen that she is a person with a strong personality. But it's this kind of person who actually makes a move to hook him up, which indicates that the problem lies with him. He is only 5 or 6 years old now, even though he appears more mature than his peers, in everyone's eyes, he is still a child, which is why we made such childlike actions with him. What's wrong? Wang Luoqi stood in front of him, shaking his finger. Wen Yan regained his composure and quickly reached out his fingers to hook Wang Luoqi together. It's not a big deal, I just think Luoqi's fingers are very beautiful and should be very suitable for playing the piano. Wang Luoqi was taken aback at the words, and after a moment she said, maybe. Come on, let's stamp another seal. Dinner time. Wang Luoqi, a genius girl, is not omnipotent, at least in terms of home living, because she does not know how to cook. Listening to the splashing water in the bathroom, Wen Yan felt that she had never eaten at home. How did Wen Yan know? It's very simple. He's in the kitchen now, looking at the clean but smokeless kitchen utensils. A hint of confusion rises in Wen Yan's heart. Even the kitchen utensils at home are brand new women, and there are no fruits or vegetables in the refrigerator. Can we expect her to cook? Crunch. Wang Luoqi walked out of the bathroom because she had an extra child at home. She didn't come out to blow her hair wrapped in a towel as usual, but instead changed into a refreshing nightgown. She was wiping her hair with a towel when she saw a confused little guy standing in the kitchen. Are you hungry? A bit. Wen Yan nodded. I usually eat at work, so I don't open fire at home, but I ordered takeout before taking a shower, and it's probably coming soon. Ding dong. Upon hearing the doorbell, Wang Luoqi was ready to open the door, but Wen Yan ran in front of her and said, Sister Luoqi, go blow your hair first, I'll get the takeout. Looking at Wen Yan's back as he opened the door, Wang Luoqi's eyes flashed with a smile. The little one was quite sensible. Wen Yan took the takeout and closed the door. Seeing that Wang Luoqi ordered beef noodles with 2 separate portions of noodle soup, he went to the kitchen to wash 2 pairs of bowls and chopsticks. He first poured the noodle soup into the washed bowl. After Wang Luoqi finished blowing his hair and came out of the bathroom, he poured the noodles into the noodle soup, so that the taste would maintain its original flavor. Wang Luoqi walked over and saw that Wen Yan had not yet moved her chopsticks. She asked, why don't you eat? Wait for Sister Luoqi. Wen Yan smiled and said, Grandma Dean said that when there are many people, it's lively and the food tastes more delicious. Wang Luoqi hesitated slightly and said, is that so? If she remembers correctly, since she was admitted to Yan University, she has almost always eaten alone except for family banquets and business gatherings during the Chinese New Year. She is not sure if what Wen Yan said is true or false, because she has long been accustomed to loneliness. Wen Yan smiled and said, of course it's true. Just saying this is not Dean Wen, but his father. He still remembers that the man with a stubborn personality never allowed his children to watch TV during dinner, and he always had to gather around a table to eat. When he was a child, he didn't understand the meaning of doing this until he grew up. It wasn't until he grew up that he realized that the man was busy outside all day, just for the family's 3 meals a day. Perhaps the warm atmosphere of a family gathering for dinner can alleviate his fatigue from working outside. Wang Luoqi chewed the noodles carefully and slowly, indicating that she was very cultured. Since Wen Yan was able to become a rising star in the music industry in his past life, he naturally took etiquette courses and knew how to be more elegant and maintain his own image. But since Wang Luoqi has adopted him, Wen Yan also does not want to disguise his lifestyle habits. After all, it is not a day or two, and disguise is ultimately not a solution. So when he eats noodles, he comes with a background sound effect of sucking and sucking. Wang Luoqi put down his chopsticks and looked up at him. Dean Wen also said that eating like this would make it more flavorful. Cough, cough. Wen Yan felt a bit embarrassed, but still insisted, of course, if you don't believe me, give it a try. Wang Luoqi was half convinced and half skeptical. Seeing Wen Yan's serious expression, she also tried to say, suck in. Listening to the echo in his ear, Wang Luoqi squinted his eyes slightly, as if he had indeed become fragrant. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. The Taste of a Girl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8 The Taste of a Girl. It has been over 10 minutes since the two of them finished their beef noodles. Wan Luoqi had just put down his chopsticks when Wen Yan began to tidy up the dishes. Wan Luoqi was slightly surprised and said, "Why, do you want to wash the dishes?" Wen Yan blinked his eyes and rightfully replied, "You buy food, I wash dishes. This distribution is reasonable." Wan Luoqi wiped his mouth with a tissue and rubbed Wen Yan's little head, saying, "Then when you grow up and date a girl, do you still want to be AA? It's better if she treats me. I'll keep my money to treat Sister Luoqi to dinner." Wen Yan's mouth was sweet. So sensible. Wan Luoqi was amused by his answer. As Wen Yan ran to the kitchen sink with her short legs, Wan Luoqi also followed and looked at the little one who could only turn on the faucet with her toes on. She took the dishes and smiled, saying, "You're still young, let me wash the dishes. When you grow taller, I won't argue with you anymore." Looking at his short legs, Wen Yan felt a bit helpless. Human cubs can't afford to be injured. In fact, a 6-year-old boy should have an average height of around 1.2 meters, while he is currently only 1.02 meters tall, which can be considered a type of child with slow development. However, the hard indicator of height is also not urgent. It is because he had a serious illness when he was a child, and the food in the welfare home was average, with some nutrition not keeping up, which is why he is lower than the average height. Looking at Wan Luoqi, who was somewhat clumsy in his movements, Wen Yan was somewhat puzzled and said, "Luoqi, have you never washed dishes before?" "How could it be? I've been living alone since I was 12 years old, how could I not know how to wash dishes?" she said, squeezing a large amount of dishwashing detergent into the water. Hee. Wen Yan smiled awkwardly. Upon hearing Wen Yan's laughter, Wan Luoqi tilted his head and asked, "What's wrong? Wasn't it washed like this?" "Yes, that's right." Wen Yan nodded quickly. But looking at a pool of foam, he still whispered, "To wash 2 bowls, there is no need to put so much detergent." Wan Luoqi paused as she washed the dishes. She slowly twisted her body and forcefully explained, "I'm worried that I won't wash it clean." So, she washed the 2 bowls for about 3 minutes. When the two of them left the kitchen, Wan Luoqi made an excuse to cover up her embarrassment. "Actually, I've been busy with work lately and haven't done any housework for a while, so my hands are a bit rough." I understand." Wen Yan nodded obediently. Watching Wen Yan's serious expression, Wan Luoqi felt a bit frustrated. Today was really her first time washing dishes. Although she has been living alone since the age of 12, she has never done any household chores. She eats in the school cafeteria when she goes to school, and her secretary orders meals after work. She never eats at home. Because of the small matter of washing dishes, Wan Luoqi also realized that she had simplified raising children. The little one is still young, and it's time for her to grow up. She can't order takeout every day, can she? After thinking for a moment, Wan Luoqi made a decision. "How about I hire an aunt for you?" "No need, I can take care of myself," Wen Yan shook his head and refused. Wan Luoqi has been living alone for a long time, with average household skills, but she has never hired an aunt. Obviously she does not like this way of life. Wen Yan doesn't want to cause trouble for her because of himself, and besides, he's not stubborn either. He can really take care of himself. Seeing Wen Yan's refusal, Wan Luoqi didn't say much. "It's getting late, I'll take you to take a shower." Wen Yan followed Wan Luoqi into the bathroom and listened as she carefully explained the usage of various tools to him. Although Wen Yan knew how to use it, he didn't interrupt, just silently listening beside him. After all, there is only a shower in the welfare home, and he cannot know the usage of these tools. Premature puberty is still within the understanding range of normal people, but it is naturally known. This is somewhat terrifying. After explaining the usage, Wan Luoqi put water in the bathtub for him before closing the door and leaving. Wen Yen took off his short sleeves and was about to put them in the storage basket when he saw that there were already many women's intimate clothes in the basket, which seemed to have been changed by Wang Luoqi while taking a shower before. Although Wen Yen was wearing very clean clothes, they were also second-hand clothes donated by kind-hearted people. He was worried that Wang Luoqi would mind. So he folded the clothes he had taken off and placed them on a small stool beside him. Standing under the shower, Wen Yen rushed down and jumped into the bathtub. Wen Yen breathed a sigh of relief as he enjoyed it. It's been a long time since he took a bath in the bathtub, and this kind of taste is really nostalgic. Add some bubble bath salt to the water. When the bathtub is filled with foam, Wen Yen closes his eyes and begins to enjoy this rare comfort. Just as Wen Yen Pao was in a daze, the door suddenly opened. He suddenly opened his eyes and saw Wang Luoqi walking over with a set of clothes. Wen Yen hurriedly moved down and only exposed his head outside, saying, "Sister Luoqi, why did you come in?" Wang Luoqi smiled and said, "Little one, you already know how shy you are at all ages. When my sister was your age, my mother often helped me rub my back. Why do you need help?" Wang Luoqi poked Wen Yenlu's exposed little head with his finger. Gulu, cough, cough. Wen Yen was so scared that he withdrew his entire head into the water, only to be choked on 2 mouthfuls of water. "Alright, I'm not teasing you anymore." Seeing Wen Yan's extreme shyness, Wang Luoqi stopped teasing him and raised her short sleeve in her hand. "I haven't bought any clothes today, and I don't see any pajamas in your bag either. You can just wear my short sleeves to make do for it." As she spoke, she threw the clothes that Wen Yen had folded and placed on the stool into the storage basket. "Remember to put these worn clothes in the basket. Sister will wash them in the morning." Then she put her short sleeves on the stool and said, "That's all for the clothes. Remember to change them after you take a shower." After speaking, she left the bathroom. It wasn't until he heard the sound of the door that Wen Yen crawled out of the water and took a deep breath. "I was careless, I forgot to lock the bathroom door." In Wang Luoqi's eyes, he was just a child of 5 or 6 years old. It was normal for him to come in while he was taking a shower and even help him rub his back. But the key is that Wen Yen feels uncomfortable. In his cute and curvaceous body, hidden was the soul of an adult. Suddenly, while taking a shower, a beautiful girl burst in, and the embarrassment in his heart could be imagined. After Wang Luoqi's interruption, Wen Yen had no intention of taking a bath. He hurriedly washed away the foam on his body with the shower, and then took a bath towel from the towel rack to wipe his body. But as he rubbed and rubbed, he suddenly felt something was wrong. "Why is this towel wet?" He lowered his head and sniffed. There was still a scent of shower gel on the towel, but he didn't use shower gel, did he? Wen Yen looked up at the towel rack and found a package of unopened bath towels on it, which means what he was holding was Tisk. No wonder there's a girl-like smell. Can you give me some recommended tickets? End of this chapter. Chapter 9. The Daily Life of a Genius Girl. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. The Daily Life of a Genius Girl. Wen Yen opened the bathroom door by a crack, revealing half of his head and quietly observing the situation outside. Seeing that Wang Luoqi was not in the living room, he walked out of the bathroom and patted his red face. The situation just now was quite awkward. Wang Luoqi's short sleeves were draped over him, just enough to cover above his knees. However, although the girl was slim, her chest was also quite large, and the short sleeves swayed slightly on him. Looking at the study with the lights on, Wen Yen quietly ran back to his room, stepping on a cold mop. Pop. He directly locked the door. Arriving at the computer desk, recalling Wang Luoqi's instructions during the day, Wen Yan's small face showed a smile, and he could only play games for 2 hours a day. Sorry, he is not playing games on the computer, so even if he exceeds the time limit, it is not considered a violation. He opened his computer and logged into his browser, starting to search for the entertainment situation in this world, to see where to start and better leverage his strengths. In his past life, he was a rising star in the Chinese music industry, so of course, he had to first look at the music situation in this world. The authoritative music software found in the browser is called Music Billboard. This is a list established by the official Cultural and Entertainment Department of China, which is very authoritative. And there is this software on the computer, so Wen Yan doesn't need to download it again. He put on his headphones, opened the music chart, and began listening to the songs inside. The setting of the music chart is still very user-friendly, with each song being able to be listened to 3 times a week, and the download fee for a single is 2 yuan per song. As a singer, Wen Yan has his own ethics, and he also highly respects the achievements of his peers. Therefore, when faced with the 2 options of free trial and paid download, he decisively chose free trial. Who wouldn't go for free if you could go for free? The main reason for coughing is that economic conditions do not allow it, just like when reading novels, many student parties choose the Biku Pavilion. Wen Yan listened to over a dozen songs that ranked high on the best-selling charts and found that songs from this world still have similarities with those from Earth. Sure enough, the blue star is the Earth trumpet. Wen Yan silently wrote that he was a little happy, which represents the entertainment soil of the blue star and can accept the entertainment works on the Earth. At least, the song is like this. Wen Yan started searching for other categories of entertainment, such as comics, anime, film and television, literature, and musical instruments. After searching everything, Wen Yan felt relieved. Just like a song, Blue Star also has a suitable soil for other cultural and entertainment works on Earth. Although there are also many cultural and entertainment classics here that people can't help but admire, Wen Yan is not hesitant because behind him stands the entire Earth. As long as the cultural and entertainment soil is similar, Wen Yan believes that the cultural and entertainment works in his mind will definitely not be inferior to Blue Star. After all, what can make him stand out are definitely classic works that have been tested by the market. As for why Wen Yan can remember so many works, of course, it's because he has golden fingers. Skill Library. Beginner Piano, Intermediate Painting, Unlocked, Works Library. Earth Entertainment Works, to be unlocked, Joy Value. 985 Sadness Value. 8 Anger Value. 28 When I first traveled, I found this data panel in my mind, and Wen Yan was so scared that he almost wasted a diaper. Until he accumulated 100 points of joy and unlocked the basic painting skills in the skill library, Wen Yan finally felt relieved, and this also allowed him to see the dawn of the future. Piano, guzheng, violin. These types of powerful tools. Suona, eru, sheng, cymbal, and gong. These types of supernatural instruments. TSK, even thinking about it is amazing. After more than 2 years of observation, Wen Yan gradually understood the role of the 3 emotional values. For example, 100 joy points unlocked his basic painting skills, and 1000 joy points unlocked his basic piano skills. The function of anger value is to upgrade skill levels. Wen Yan spent 100 points of anger value to upgrade his painting skills to intermediate level. He didn't realize the effect of anger value until a month ago. It can be said that Mrs. Wen helped him upgrade his painting skills to intermediate level with her own efforts. The remaining sadness value should be used to unlock the work library, and he is not very sure if it is because his sadness value has not yet reached 100. After all, the sources of these emotional values are obtained through something he does that triggers the corresponding emotions of the other person. At the welfare home, he can play with those children and buy snacks for them with the money earned from picking up bottles, in order to gain joy points. Sadness value, that's a bit of a jerk. Although it's easy to gain sadness points from these children by playing a few pranks on them, Wen Yan really can't do it. After all, their backgrounds are already pitiful enough. It would be inappropriate to pull wool from them. It is difficult to obtain sadness points in a welfare home with ethical conduct, but now with the internet, everything is different. Wen Yen showed a wicked smile at the corner of his mouth as he opened Tribe on his computer, which is a software similar to the combination of Weibo and Xiaopa station in his past life. He registered his own account with the ID name Wild Autumn Swordfish. Then he quickly screened and followed several popular bloggers, starting to leave comments below. For example, this love blogger named Pink Girl Heart, after a few minutes of observation, Wen Yen found that those who followed her were all artistic youths. The latest update from this blogger is, describe your first love in one sentence. The following message has exceeded 1,000, and Wen Yen immediately scrolled through the keyboard with his little hand and wrote 3 comments with a clattering sound. Ta is the southern wall that I have bumped into without hesitation, and it is an empty and joyful scene in my dream. I was born in the south and grew up in the north. Planting in their hands can be considered as having been to a different place. They love me the most, but only they don't appreciate it the most. In order to enhance the sense of immersion and achieve gender equality, Wen Yen did not mention gender, but instead used a reference to Ta. For example, this real-name certified top-tier singer named Zhang Xiaoyu has a serious polarization of reputation, belonging to the kind of crazy thieves loved by fans and arrogant thieves with black fans and black fans. However, most passers-by are indifferent because they cannot understand what he is singing. Tonight, he just released the music video for his new song, and a group of fans are leaving messages below. Wow, brother is so handsome. Brother, listen carefully when singing. The new song has been downloaded, and sisters are cheering their brothers to hit the hot list. Wen Yen also didn't want to disrupt the atmosphere of unity and friendship between them, so he didn't leave any messages like, how to do it, or, summoning souls, like black fans did. Looking at the time of 0.39 in the bottom right corner of the computer, Wen Yen silently downloaded about 10 food action pictures from the browser and posted them on the celebrities' message board. After finishing these warm words and turning off the computer, I believe his sadness level should exceed 100 tomorrow. Wen Yen walked out of the bedroom and prepared to go to Bo's bedtime. But as soon as he left the room, he was stunned for a moment. The living room, kitchen, master bedroom, hallway, and even bathroom of the home are all illuminated with headlights, shining brightly on every corner of the house. Is this the stubbornness of wealthy people? Wen Yen felt a bit puzzled in his heart. When he leaves the bathroom, turn off the lights one by one. Even if he has money, wasting is not a good habit. As he walked up to the study, he was about to go in and turn off the lights when he accidentally saw through the crack in the door that there was a young girl inside who was still sitting at his desk correcting documents. Silently walking back to the room, Wen Yen sighed slightly. Is this the daily routine of a genius girl? The keyboard in the early morning was particularly cold and hard, hoping that a wealthy woman could see through my stubbornness and enter my heart with tickets and rewards. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Meatballs are a bit heavy. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. Meatballs are a bit heavy. Qi Li Xiang Du. At 5:30 in the morning, the sky in the magic city was still dim, and the pink alarm clock by the bedside rang. The little one curled up in the cool summer blanket wriggled and rolled around on the bed before reaching out and pressing the alarm clock. Ah, Wen Yen sat up and yawned. Then he started getting up and getting dressed, going to the bathroom to wash up. Due to his height, he also had to step on a small stool when brushing his teeth and washing his face. The reason why Wen Yen woke up so early was to go out and buy some breakfast, so that he could have some good feelings with Wang Luoqi and harvest some joy. Well, it's not because he thinks the girl who was still working at the desk in the early morning is a bit pitiful. After packing up, Wen Yen took the key and left room 601. Yesterday on his way here, he saw several breakfast shops not far from Calixiang. On the way, Wen Yen also took the opportunity to check last night's results. Despite having a sadness score of 98 points, it surprisingly did not reach 100. Is this group of netizens so capable of withstanding pressure? Is it unscientific that the classic melancholic short sentence, combined with late-night poisoning, only increases sadness by 90 points? Wen Yen glanced at his anger level again, 138 points. He grinned, that's right. However, after this online debut, Wen Yen also found that the emotional value brought by the screen is not as strong as in reality. You should know that a month ago, Mrs. Wen provided him with over 100 anger points alone. However, this is also reasonable. After all, everyone is a stranger across the screen, who would be angry with a stranger. At most, there will be some emotional fluctuations at the moment of first sight. Wen Yen felt that if he could know the source of his emotional value, last night his mind might have been filled with a series of sadness from XXX+1 and anger from XXX+1. Tisk, it's quite interesting to think about. Since the anger value exceeded 100, Wen Yen easily elevated his beginner's piano to intermediate level. Well, the distance from the piano prince has come one step closer. More than 10 minutes later, Wen Yen came to a breakfast shop called Kanji Dingji. As soon as she entered the door, a woman in her 30s, wearing an apron, greeted her and said, "Children, what would you like?" "Auntie, how much does a meat bun cost?" Wen Yen felt a bit helpless. He didn't even have money in his pocket and had to ask for the price before buying something. Isn't this what his father often said? People are poor and short of breath. 3 yuan each, how much do the children want? Wen Yen, a black shop, silently roasted that the steamed buns near the welfare home were only 2 yuan, and indeed, the steamed buns in the urban area were like rice noodles across the bridge, which directly increased their value. Wen Yen continued to ask, how much is a bowl of bean curd jelly served with sauce? 5 yuan. The woman didn't get impatient and answered warmly. Wen Yen touched the change he had saved up by picking up bottles in his pocket, silently calculated the price, and then spoke up. For meat buns, 2 bowls of bean curd jelly served with sauce. Okay. The woman helped Wen Yen pack the buns and asked, do you want sweet or salty for children? Of course it's salty. In the face of the controversy over the sweetness and saltiness of bean curd jelly served with sauce, Wen Yen stood firm. At the same time, he added. Sprinkle some soybeans, then add some chili and vinegar. The boss smiled and said, hey, kids are quite talkative. Wen Yen takes steamed stuffed buns and bean curd jelly served with sauce and asks, how much is it altogether? 22 yuan. The boss replied in seconds. Auntie, give me a 0. No, small business. Wen Yan's eyes rolled and he immediately changed his tone. Sister, do you think the 20 lines are fine? I'll come back tomorrow. I don't know if this sister sound played a role, or if the woman wanted to attract a repeat customer. She nodded and said, okay, just this time. Wen Yen casually paid the bill and left, which was not his stinginess. He even wanted to take advantage of others by buying breakfast. The key is that besides Zhao Wanqi's 200 yuan, he really has no money on him. A penny can't defeat a hero, the ancients never deceived me. Wen Yen decided that he wanted to make money. Returning to Chili Xiangdu, opening the door, Wen Yen glanced at the wall clock in the living room, which was 6:15. He placed breakfast on the dining table and didn't shout for Wang Luoqi to wake up. She probably didn't go to bed until late yesterday, so now he's going to wake her up. He met someone who was angry about waking up and didn't throw him downstairs. He is not hungry now either. After Wang Luoqi wakes up, he can heat it up in the microwave and eat together. Just as he was about to return to his room, he heard a creaking sound from the bathroom door. He turned his head and saw Wang Luoqi stepping on a cold mop and coming out from inside. She was wearing a teddy bear nightgown that hung down to her knees, with her back facing the sunlight from the bathroom, outlining the delicate curves of her upper body. The uncovered parts of her nightgown revealed her slender and fair calves. At this time, she was holding a toothbrush, with some foam around her mouth, and her long black hair was not tied up, spreading freely on her shoulders. Her oval face also had the characteristic languor of the morning. "Hey, wake up so early." Her voice was a bit vague. "Sister Luochi, I'm a bit disoriented and woke up earlier in a new environment." Wen Yan casually made an excuse. Then he pointed to the breakfast on the table and said, "When I was strolling downstairs just now, I bought some breakfast on the way." Wang Luochi went to the table and looked at the steamed stuffed buns and bean curd jelly served with sauce on the table. "Did you buy them on your way?" Wen Yan is also embarrassed to say that it seems like you are working hard staying up late, so I can help you buy some breakfast. A girl like Wang Luochi with a strong personality doesn't need anyone's pity. Besides, he's just a child now and it's not appropriate to say too much, so he just casually lied. My bones are a bit weak. The dean's grandmother asked me to run more in the morning to exercise. These breakfasts were bought by me when I got hungry after running. Okay, we'll eat together later." Wang Luochi turned around and returned to the bathroom, continuing to wash up. "Hey, I'm not hungry yet." Looking at Wang Luochi's back, Wen Yan finally didn't shout out this sentence. The lie he told can only be reconciled by himself. A few minutes later, the two gathered around the dining table and began to eat. Wang Luochi takes a sip of bean curd jelly served with sauce and squints slightly. "It seems that it tastes good. By the way, I forgot to give you pocket money yesterday. How did you buy breakfast?" "I saved it up while picking up bottles." Wen Yan didn't feel any sense of inferiority when picking up bottles. After all, every penny of his money was soaked in his sweat. Wang Luochi, who was eating steamed buns, paused slightly as she felt the small meat bun in her hand suddenly gain weight after breakfast. Wang Luochi returned to his bedroom. Looking at her back, Wen Yan felt a bit suspicious. "Today is the breakfast I bought, can't you tidy up the table?" Sure enough, the young lady is the young lady, and she is a runner. Wen Yan sighed and threw disposable tableware into the trash can. At this moment, Wang Luochi walked out and handed Wen Yan some cash, saying, "This is 500 yuan, you keep it as pocket money." Wen Yan's eyes lit up slightly, and the 20 yuan breakfast was exchanged for 500 yuan in cash, which was a 25 times rebate. Sister Luochi, is Ning my urban god system? End of this chapter.